You're listening to the Marginally Geeky Show, the epically
Yep.
Welcome out to the Marginally Geeky Show, episode number 6, the Epically Geeky Book Club. I'm your host for the evening, Eugene Stevens. Tonight I'm joined by, almost the entire group, which is pretty awesome. Just starting from left to right here, we have Mr. Parker, we have Jennifer Hetzel, we have, it says Kelly, but it's Boldy. Everyone knows it's Boldy. Chris Andrew, and of course, Lainey. How's everyone doing?
Good. Sleepy. Very sleepy.
Good. Anyone have anything they want to share that's happened within the last month since the last time we reconvened? They'd like to throw out there. Something's happened to them, of interest. Hopefully something pretty good.
I watched a lot of Golden Girls.
Okay.
And we recorded another podcast.
Nice. Like to hear that.
Yeah.
Music one.
That's coming out as soon as I can get it edited.
Tell me about it, sister. Lainey and I this last weekend went to AggieCon and got to actually meet some pretty cool cosplayers there. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we're actually going to have them on the Epically Geeky Show here in a couple of weeks. And other than that, I've just been working on props and just, trying to survive.
What kind of props are you working on, sir?
I am currently working on a ghost trap. I actually just finished the hose connector for my flight suit, for my Ghostbusters flight suit. But the guy, there's a guy who works for Tested.com, which is Adam Savage's website. And last year he put out the 3D plans to make a ghost trap. And his trap does everything. You hit the pedal, it opens up. There's lights, there's sound, closes back up, it smokes. It's legit. And he's had the 3D files out there for a long time. And 2 weeks ago, he released the information on how to do the smoke in the doors, but still hasn't released the electronics information. And I'm just everyone in the community is just come on, dude, just get it out there, man. We can't wait. So I'm in the process of sanding and painting the ghost trap. And let me tell you, that's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but it's going to be awesome when it's done. So.
Well, I'm sure it's going to come out great.
I thought of something
real good.
Eugene to 3D print for me.
What's that?
I want you to 3D print one of those edible teacups from Willy Wonka.
I can't print it edible, but I could print. It
doesn't have to be edible.
Okay.
But that's what I want. I want one of those little daffodil teacups.
Wait, do you think one day they'll have a sugar serum that
they already have
use?
It. They've already got printers like that will do that. They're a specialty printer, but it actually uses different extruders, and it's basically just a gel that it heats the gel, and then when it goes, it cools, and you can 3D print stuff. So
very dangerous.
That's how you bite it.
Yeah. So this show isn't about 3D printing, although now that I'm thinking about that, make a pretty good show.
Sure.
Tonight's episode, our book club is reconvening to talk about, I'll be very honest, one of my favorite books of all time. This is, we'll get to that in a second. Tonight we're talking about Seth Grahame-Smith's Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. We can start off with some of our just kind of initial impressions. I started reading, I was never a big reader. Growing up, I didn't care for reading in school most of the time. There were some stories here and there that I really liked. But a lot of the stories, for whatever reason, just turned me off to reading. And I thought I just didn't like reading. I really thought, I'm just not a reader. I don't care for reading, whatever. But it wasn't until I got older and became an adult that I started finding books that I'm like, wow, no, I do like reading. This is awesome. And this is one of those books that did that for me. I love this story. I've read this book. Let's see, this is probably my 5th or 6th time going through this book, to be quite honest with you. I adore this book. So it's obviously going to get big thumbs up for me. So,
Oh,
anyone else want to share some initial thoughts on old Abe Lincoln here?
I liked it. I thought it was a good book.
Okay.
I knew little to nothing coming into the book. I knew that it was Abraham Lincoln, and I knew that he killed vampires, and that's literally all I knew.
There you go.
like snakes on the plane.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It's the snakes on the plane, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect, and then I probably got, what is it, like 20 pages in, and then there's a horrific depiction of someone dying. I was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Let's keep
I wasn't
going.
a big fan of that.
It was, I don't know, it caught me off guard, I guess.
Well, the book does start off kind of slow. It's the build up to the actual story. And then once we get to the actual retelling of the story, that's when it just hits the ground and just never lets up. For me, the book just ran pretty much the entire time. Jen, any initial thoughts?
So I like that it's modeled after an actual history book. As a history major, I'm kind of geeking out over that. And if I didn't know better, I'd think some of this was, true. So I think that's really neat. And it's an interesting theory and everything. And this is my first time reading it. So,
Okay.
no prior knowledge. Hadn't seen the movie, which I hear isn't that great anyway. So.
We will discuss the movie at the end. So any of you who have seen the movie, don't worry, you will get a chance to vent at the end.
Good.
Yeah. I know. Chris is waiting to vent on that one. So, you read the book previously and saw the movie, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. She's in the same boat I am. So, what about you, Boldy? Had you read it previously, or?
I read it when it first came out, so
Ooh.
that's what I'm saying. I'm still really sketchy on it. I remember having come from a background where I took a course actually in college on Gothic literature, and of course we read every vampire book under the sun. And having that background and that kind of foundation going into this, I was probably the opposite of most of you all. And I was like that group that was like, okay, this is really hokey writing, and really cheesy, And I did. I had trouble getting through it because I remember reading. I was like reading 2 or 3 books at the same time. But I mean, that's just because I had something opposite of what you all did. And then subsequently, after having that foundation, I also read every, Charlene Harris book under the sun, which is, what True Blood was based on. And so to throw in the dynamic with Abraham Lincoln and the theory of the vampires, I mean, it's all fantastic and everything, but the overall writing style wasn't my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a good book, it's not one of my favorites, but I haven't seen the movie either, so I can't do a comparison there.
We basically didn't see it either, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I mean, It's a good premise. It's a great premise, and I have been told to read, his other work, his other novels, but I haven't done that either. So, like I said, I got to refresh my memory and recall a lot of things. But initially, those were my first thoughts, because at the time I can remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get through the book."
Well, fair enough. I mean,
Yeah.
which is why that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite a diverse group on this show.
Sure.
So we have, differences of opinion. So, well, that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I listened to like I always do. I listened to the audiobook, and on the audiobook, at the very end of it, they actually do a quick interview with Seth Grahame-Smith, and they ask him about it. And he actually wrote this book. He got the idea for this book, I should say, before he even wrote his first book, which really kind of threw him out there in the stratosphere, which was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So he actually came up with this idea before he wrote that one. And he got the idea by literally it was a big anniversary of, I can't remember if it was Lincoln's death or Lincoln's birth, but it was a big anniversary. And he said he walked into, it seemed like, he's like, every week I'd go into a bookstore and I would literally see tables of all these different, Lincoln biographies, whether it talked about, his politics, the way he grew up, his sexuality. There were books written about everything about Lincoln. And then, like, literally right next to that is, this was at the height of the Sparkly Vampires time. So it's just nothing but vampire books. And he's like, well, I wonder what chocolate and peanut butter taste like together. And threw together the idea. He said very quickly, though, once he started writing the book, he realized something. When he actually wrote Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, he tried to make sure that he tried to keep the language as close to Jane Eyre's as possible. Of course, there's a lot of fantastical stuff in that book, but he tried to keep the language pretty true to what he thought would be, close enough, because he really was not trying to piss off any Jane Eyre.
Jane Austen.
I keep saying Jane Eyre. Jane Austen.
I was like,
fans.
Two books, dude.
He was really trying not to piss off any fans, and he said, I ran into that doubly so here. He's like, there are people to this day that consider, Lincoln to be, if not the greatest president we've ever had, and will ever have in some cases. So he was really trying not to piss off those people. So he did a lot of research, and you brought up, Jen, about how it's like a history book, and he did a lot of research. So the times and dates that he lists, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, the dates and times that he lists are pretty close. Lincoln was probably there or close to that location. So, like later on in the book, when he's part of the group of lawyers that's going around and doing all the trials, and that time of his life, that's what he was actually doing. So it matches up pretty closely. He was really, once again, trying not to piss off all of the. What would you call yourself as an extreme Lincoln fan?
Lincolnite.
A Lincolnite, a log member. I don't know.
Lincolnist, I don't know.
Lincolnist, yeah, we'll go with that. So
there you go.
All right, so let's begin our discussion of the book. So, like we said, the book actually starts off as an interesting way. It's the author basically giving it his background, as it were. And the premise of the book is he was given these diaries that were written by Abraham Lincoln, and that he kept pretty much all of his life, that journaled his killing of vampires. He works at a small a general store. Guy comes in wearing dark glasses, has a couple conversations with him, shows up one day, hands him these books. There's a letter attached, and basically it says, I'm tasking you with keeping these, safe and secret. You can't talk to anyone about it, and you're going to write a book about the contents of these books. And while he's doubting this, he shows back up, and he turns out to be a vampire. And basically, scares the hell out of him. And after that point, he spends, I think he said, the next 6 months or whatever, writing and compiling the book. So it's at that point we actually get started with the story. So let me pull up my notes here. Let's see here. The first thing that it starts off... Oh, one quick thing before we actually start with it. One of the things that I really loved about this book is the beginning of every chapter starts off with an actual quote from Abraham Lincoln, whether it be from one of his addresses, from a letter he wrote. It's all very poignant to that particular chapter. I love that. I love the fact that he was able to weave those in there. So,
yeah, I just like the sporadic, just coming back into reality stuff, like you were talking about, like him going around with all the other lawyers doing their actual stuff that he really did, and it's fun little nods back to what he was actually doing and just kind of weaving it into the real story.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done that way, for sure.
And I thought about it reading this and thinking back to last month's book, which was the Princess Diarist. I think we all kind of agreed on that one, that we would have almost rather had her diaries kind of like sprinkled in throughout the book instead of just being one
like
section.
One huge chunk.
Yeah, and I kept thinking about that. I thought, reading his quotes in here, like I said at the beginning of each chapter, I thought, man, that reinforces my opinion on that previous book, that I really wish they had done that. They had sprinkled these little things in there throughout time, and then instead of just one big section. So, Okay, so let's see here. So, okay, so it starts off as a boy, and it talks about it. It talks about him killing a turkey whenever he was 7 years old, and then he cried, and he just, it's very traumatic as to him killing this turkey, and he just feels horrible about it, and he can't bring himself to eat it, and he just is like, I'll never kill another living thing as long as I live. Which was funny because I think the book specifically said, and he doesn't. He doesn't ever kill another living thing.
Yeah.
For the rest of his time. So I'm like,
Nope.
well, there you go. There's a loophole. But it does some backstory stuff. It talks about how the murder rates in the U.S., continue to keep going up because of the cities. And then talks about his father, Thomas Lincoln. He was a carpenter. He bought 300 acres, mostly wooded land, and he moved Abe when they were 3. It really goes in to talk about his mother. He had a very close relationship with his mother, Nancy. She taught him to read. She encouraged his curiosity. There's a very close bond there, and it comes through there. The mother's on the episode here. Any thoughts on that?
Like what?
Well, just does that kind of hit home a little bit?
No.
No. It's kind of reviews.
Okay, I was just wondering because I'll be honest. Later on, we'll talk about it. Okay, so it goes on and talks about Thomas was a Baptist, believed slavery was a sin, moved his family to Indiana, and it talks about he was a drunk. He never put himself really out there. Like he did the bare minimum to keep his family alive. But he was a good storyteller, and he talks about that several times. His aunt and his uncle come to live on the farm, help things out. And then he wakes up late one night, and he has to get up to go to the bathroom. So he goes out to the outhouse or whatever, and he hears his dad walking around talking to someone. He has no idea who this person is. He's never heard this person's voice before. And he ends up finding out that he's basically saying, I can't pay you back the money, and the other voice says, well, then I'll take it in other ways. So at that point, his aunt and uncle die shortly after that from what he refers to as milk sickness. Of course, we're talking about in this time, people died of things, and they're like, oh, well, it's obviously this, when there was no way to really tell what it was. 4 days later, Nancy, his mom, gets sick.
So he just kills the mom as payment?
Mm-hmm.
He killed the aunt and the uncle first.
But didn't take their blood from him, just killed him?
Just flat out killed them. And then, from
the
what
mom.
it sounds like, the way it describes it, the milk sickness, as they refer to it, was, as he put it, a fool's dose of the blood. So that it caused them to get really sick, and basically they just, it sounds like, and I don't know how exactly that worked. Like, apparently for them, they died pretty quick. They all of a sudden just seemed to get really sick, and then boom, they were dead. But his mom actually was in pain for several days. And he talked about that. He thought it was punishment for killing the turkey and for being curious about the death of his aunt and his uncle. So yeah, he has to watch his mom die, and right before she dies, she tells him to live, and then she passes away, and he's heartbroken. So he tries to run away, and he hears screams in the middle of the night, and then he's not sure what it is. He thinks it's animals, so on and so forth. They're starting to allude to the possible vampires being out in the wilderness. So he comes back home, and his dad leaves for, granted, this is modern day time, but the idea of that dad is like, all right, well, I'm leaving for 2 weeks. Y'all basically have to take care of yourselves out in the wilderness. And when I come back, I'll have another wife. Bye.
Yeah, right? It's like, man, simpler times.
Yeah, no joke, right? So yeah.
Let's go pick one up real quick and be back.
Exactly. Just go to the grocery store,
BRB.
pick up a new wife,
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
Yeah, but so anyway, his dad does leave and does come back with a new wife. It's someone that he knew previously. She was a widow and had kids of her own, and he's really like, he gets in that mindset of probably most kids that, in a step parent like type relationship, oh, I'm going to hate this person. It doesn't matter what they're like, I'm going to hate them. And he just can't, because she helps him read. She encourages him. She's very nurturing to him. Not a replacement for his mom, but he definitely, grows to love her. And then he loves his new brothers and sisters as well, because, they're close to his age. They run around, they play. They like doing a lot of the stuff that he likes doing. It turns out to be a pretty good thing. So, Sarah Bush was her name. So
they can make him like a more well-rounded boy to go out and play versus just being a giant nerd and reading books all day.
Yeah, and he brings that out to the fact that he's like, he was always willing to go to war, and he had to talk me into it. But then once we did, we had a lot of fun and stuff. So yeah. Obviously, it really sounds like Abe was going to be pretty much a book nerd. He was definitely he definitely would have fit in here. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, right.
All the children's books focus on that and drill that and kill that into the biographies for the kids. It's just how avid a reader he was, and that was such a huge part of his life that impacted him and stuff. So that's ironic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they definitely should, focus on that. So, and then we get to the part where things start to change. His dad gets drunk, tells him to come outside, and he's gonna, they're sitting around a campfire or whatever, and he starts telling him this story. And he's like, I've heard this story, but for fear of speaking up, and basically getting a whooping, he just lets his dad tell the story yet again of how his father, his grandfather, Abraham, died. And he's like, the story starts off the exact same way. He's on a plow mule, and his brother, and they're helping their dad, and they're getting pretty close to the edge of the property where there's a bunch of trees, and they start to hear a noise. And in the original story, it's Indians that come out and they scalp him and kill him, and it's very traumatic. And it's at this point where the story changes, and at this point it becomes a young vampire boy basically just like jumps through the trees, and is strong and powerful as his dad is. He isn't able to land a single blow. And he basically like crushes his arm, breaks his legs, just rips the man apart, without any problem at all. And tells him that it was a vampire.
In a really gruesome way too. Like describing how he killed him was pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. Like I think at one point he's like crushing his head or his chest.
Gross.
Or that's what it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was very graphic, and I was like, okay,
very graphic.
So, and so now we get the backstory on exactly what happened to aunt and uncle and mom. His dad had borrowed money from Jack Bartz, who was a one-armed vampire, short, stocky guy. You never would expect it. And not being able to pay the money back, he came back and killed everyone. So at this point, this is where Abe starts to really hate. He begins this lifelong hatred of his father. And like we said at the beginning, at the top of the show, a lot of the stuff in the book is based on reality. So I wonder, does anyone know for a fact, did Abraham Lincoln have a lifelong hatred of his actual father?
Didn't have any more of a tumultuous relationship than anybody in that time had with their father, because I don't know, every biography I've ever read about anybody really usually tries to paint that as a thing, whether it was like totally true or not. But I've never heard anything like really concrete that was like, yep, they totally hated each other. I mean, he was a father back then. It wasn't warm and fuzzy. So,
right.
Whenever you read a biography about Walt Disney, you can always tell if it's a good one, but based on how they portray his relationship with his dad.
Okay.
There you go.
So,
well, I know they mentioned
I do the same thing.
He mentions that whenever he died, he only made like one quick comment in one of his journals or something, or ever only wrote one quick thing, and that was pretty much it. So I was just wondering. I'm assuming, guess I have to do some research on that, but I'm assuming his it was an actual, he actually did dislike his father. So sorry, I just looked over in the chat room, and one of the people wrote, Ryan wrote, a Lincoln fanboy is called an Abe Leadist.
Abe Leadist. Nice.
I like that.
Awesome.
So
God.
yeah. By the way, thanks for everyone in the chat room. Thanks for being on. So, sorry, I have to look at a separate screen. So if I'm looking over here, that's what it is. So, it's at this point we would get. If I were to do a movie of this, this is where we would start to get our training montage, because it's at this point he basically declares that, his hatred for his father, and that he swears that he's going to kill all vampires. So he starts working out, but it's not just physical. So he talks about the fact that he's chopping wood. He's able to chop even more wood. He's like keeping his axe super sharp. He's able to throw it, into a tree from like 10 and then 20, then 30 yards away. But he also talks about he was a ravenous reader, read everything he could get his hands on, specifically anything with the occult.
I wish you hadn't said training montage, because now I'm thinking of Eye of the Tiger, and I don't like it.
Well,
What's wrong with Eye of the Tiger?
Was I the only one that was just reading this book? I was like, man, this is like, I could see the movie, like what he was trying to describe in the movie. Like he wrote the book almost like he knew it was going to be made a movie.
Yes, and yet we got the garbage that we got.
Yeah.
Shots fired.
Damn.
Yeah. So let's see here. We're getting echo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Real quick, Lainey, say something.
Heyo.
Chris.
I haven't even been talking. Look at me.
Yeah, it's you. Sorry, Chris. Can you drop out and sit back in? Poor Canada.
Whatever.
All right, let's see. Am I still echoing? Nope, that was it.
Always Canada.
It's always Canada.
Always Canada.
Blame Canada.
There you go. So anyway, he does this training montage. He starts to get stronger and faster, and he learns what he can about vampires. And he writes a letter to Bart and basically says, to come to the cabin. So he shows up, and he's working. I think it said he was working on the roof with his father, and there she is. And Bart shows up. His dad's like just taken back. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. And he goes to go get a wooden box that's supposed to have this money that supposedly his dad promised Bart that he would have. And he proceeds to take a wooden stake out and kill Bart right then and there. Just stakes him through the heart.
He does.
Yeah. So it's at this point he's killed his first vampire. He's pretty excited about it. His dad's like, "You've ruined us all. Someone was going to come. There's going to be more of them," and no one ever does. Which he talks about a little bit more later. But anyway, 4 years goes by. No vampires. Never sees one. He's actively trying to hunt them. He just can't find any. So, in about 4 years, he's 16. He tells his dad he's going to go work on a riverboat. And when he's on the riverboat, he's hearing these stories about these children that are missing in the middle of the night, and he's pretty sure it's a vampire. So he figures out that it's happening as it's going down this river. So as he follows along, and he thinks he kind of has an idea of where things are happening. He sees an old raft tied up. He's pretty sure there's someone there, and then he realizes, oh no, they're actually not on board, and it turns out to be an old woman carrying a child. And as she gets up, he races over there to try to attack her, and she basically swats him down like a fly, and then proceeds to hold his head underwater to drown him. And then before he passes out, she disappears suddenly, and he doesn't remember anything else except for waking up several days later. He's in a underground room. It's dark. And he's got a bunch of stuff on his chest. It's healing him where he had broken ribs and everything. And a guy walks over and, is kind of telling him some stuff. He's like, "You're healing." And And after a little bit of the conversation, he realizes that the guy's a vampire. So he's trying to lash out after him, but he's restrained to the bed. And this happens for days. Like, he refuses to eat. He won't say anything. He just, is doing everything he possibly can to refuse dealing with the guy. But then he does finally give in. He does finally start to eat a little bit. And he starts to talk to the vampire because he starts reading all these different books, including Shakespeare, so on and so forth. And then we start to get the information on it. And the vampire's name is Henry. Turns out to be the same vampire that visited our author at the beginning of the book. His name is Henry Sturgis.
Did anybody else think of 10 Cloverfield Lane?
No.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, okay, never mind.
I haven't seen it yet.
I can see that connection, though, Parker.
Yeah, because he rescues a person and then brings them down to an underground thing, and then they're chained up, and
kept there. Yeah.
then you learn that they're not exactly what you think.
Okay, don't say any more. Don't say any more. I still want to see the movie.
Hey, there's no spoilers here, man.
Okay, so, and then we get Henry's background, and this goes back to yet another historical event. And Henry was supposedly a member crossing in the Atlantic, and was one of the pioneers at Roanoke. And he tells this once again a very horrific story of how there, and historically this was found of a CRO being carved into a couple of different places, and once we get the story, we find out
that's real.
Yes, that is real.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That is real.
That? Somebody didn't pay attention in history in high school.
Hell no, I didn't.
So we get the background as to it, and of course, this telling of it is the doctor was a vampire, and proceeded to basically was slowly but surely starting to kill people off, and then he's found out, and then he has to kill 5 or 6 people right offhand, and realizes that that's just not going to do. So he proceeds to completely wipe out the entire village.
I'll just kill everybody.
Yeah,
a real sustainable life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No survivors. There's no one to snitch on.
Exactly.
Well, there's nobody to eat later.
That's a good theory for Roanoke.
Do what?
Yeah.
That's a good theory for Roanoke.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd much rather take that kind of theory of Roanoke than, hey,
dysentery and cannibalism or whatever.
According to Cyrus, Lincoln was basically Rocky.
Oh my god.
Oh, nice.
Shut up, Marion.
Not bad.
I didn't realize he was in the chat room. Anyway, so
What's Roanoke? A Canadian doesn't know.
okay.
Oh, that's right. You wouldn't know what that is.
It's one of the greatest enigmas of the United States.
You want to fill her in?
No, go ahead.
I'm talking too much. I don't want to talk too much.
It basically is what happened in the book. The whole town just wasn't there anymore when they came back for supplies to resupply them.
It was a settlement that settled and then just
wasn't.
Nobody really knows what happened, and
one of the first
was carved into some of the trees there. That was an actual thing.
Yeah, they think it was an Indian attack, but Native American. They think it was a Native American attack, but there's no real. The problem is there's no real evidence that that's exactly what happened. Like there never seemed to be sign of a battle. It's like the people just literally just disappeared.
Like vanished.
Yeah.
This would be a good time to use that GIF or that picture, that meme with that guy just saying aliens.
Oh yeah, no joke. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Basically, everything that we think was, blamed on Native Americans was really vampires in this book.
Right.
Basically, yes.
Basically, yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. I mean, go back. I just never heard of.
Yeah, that's Roanoke. So
that's your U.S. history lesson for the day.
Yay!
I'm learning so much. Well, because I barely know anything about Abraham Lincoln in general. I knew he was a president of the United States, and that he was a really tall dude, and that he had
Billy hat
in the hat, and that he had a lot to do. He was heavily involved in. He was an abolitionist and believed in abolishing slavery, and he was a big part of all that. And he got shot in a theater.
This
spoiler
isn't
alert.
real. He there was not a vampire hunter. Just so
Sorry.
we're clear.
Well, I figured as much, but that's why
Okay.
I was reading it was because it mixed that, and I learned I knew that some of it had actually happened. Like there was actual events that he had actually been a part of, and he was there. And I know vampires.
And you know more now than 50% of America about it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no joke, right?
Because most people don't even know our history in America.
No, I know more of your history than I do my own history.
And,
Okay.
Yeah, but
including
Canada's
our
like the
president,
oldest,
because
yo.
apparently he doesn't think most people knew that he was Lincoln was a Republican. So anyway,
Oh yeah.
fun
that's right.
fact. But not to go down
Most
that
people
rabbit
also
hole.
don't know that the Republican Party, as it is now, would be unrecognizable to the Republican Party back then.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So anyway, basically, and it's horrific because literally it's Henry trying to, like, almost dying. Like he's basically dying. He watches his wife die, and the only reason the vampire doesn't finish him off is because the only other person he spared was the first baby born, in the Americas, and he was like, well, I'm not going to have anyone to talk to for quite a while, and this is going to get kind of boring, so I'm going to keep you alive. So he turns him, and then ends up killing the child, which was just like, whoa. Anyway,
Why'd you have to do that? Like,
yeah, no joke,
come on.
right?
I wasn't a huge fan of all of the.
The ridiculous amount of killing in the book.
Yeah, that didn't sit very well with me. Like,
So Abe gets better and proceeds to start to learn from Henry how to attack and kill vampires. He tells him, he basically shoots down a bunch of stuff. He's like, well, what about garlic? And he's like, yeah, it just lets us, smell you easier. And he's like, holy water, no such thing. Sunlight will kill us, but usually it's just like the very first turn, the quote unquote young of us.
And then I could see this being a training montage too in a movie.
Exactly.
It's like, well, what about this? And it's like holding up garlic, and he's like,
yeah, exactly.
cook with it, and it's like, ha ha ha. It's like, yeah.
So,
and like a buddy comedy too. Like,
it was absolutely like a buddy cop movie.
ah,
Yeah, absolutely.
no, please don't do that. Actually, you know what? Technically, it kind of was when we get there. Abe returns. He returns home. His sister dies in childbirth, and Henry starts sending letters. And basically, he's like, look, don't judge us all equally. That's one of the things he keeps saying. Don't judge us all equally, Abraham. We all probably need to burn in hell, but there are some of us who need to burn sooner than others. And in these letters I'm sending you are the names of those who basically need to get the axe first, quite literally. Yeah. So he gets this first letter. He leaves a week later, and basically beheads this cobbler. He walks into the...
Yes, he does.
Yeah, he walks in, and he's literally like, he asks the town, where can I find the cobbler? And they're like, oh, it's over here. So he walks in, and he asks the guy's name, and the guy's like, oh, yeah, that's me, and just basically pulls out his axe and with a quick swing knocks the guy's head off. So
When that happened, I went back and read it again because I thought I missed a page.
Uh-huh.
Because then it's like, oh yeah, that's my name, and then it's just the next page is like, then I walk out.
Exactly.
Like, did I miss something? And it's like, no.
No big.
Like I was like, oh, okay. Well,
my opinion on that was this was their way of or his way of punctuating the fact that, like, he doesn't give a fuck. He's just literally like, look, you're a vampire, done and done. He does go into detail on some of the other meetings with the vampires, if there's like a confrontation or something. But for the most part, he's just like, and he even says it later on in the book. There's one point he's like, I was really tired. My plan was literally to knock on the door, and whoever answers the door, literally just bury my chest, and whoever answered the door, in their chest,
it's like
my axe in their chest, and just go on. So
it's like a hitman, just
basically,
like another day, kill somebody else and then move on.
So he receives 15 letters over 3 years and keeps improving his skills and his work. He ends up taking a job working selling goods on a boat on the Mississippi. He ends up building the boat. He sees vampires in a wagon in daylight with another one watching him. And that's I'm sorry, that's when they get down to the end of the Mississippi. They're in New Orleans. He sees vampires out and about in daylight, like just like normal people. No one's saying shit about shit. And then he locks eyes with one vampire that he thinks is following him. So he proceeds to follow him, chases him around quite a bit, loses him in the cemetery, and then is confronted by the vampire asking, why are you chasing me? And he's like, well, I could ask you the same thing. And it's not a vampire. It's Edgar Allan Poe.
Hell yeah, it is.
That to me was a little extra. Like I got to that point, I'm like, oh, okay, we get it. Like
having Elvis show up. It's like, come on.
Seriously, like let's.
My question is did he ever
so
actually meet him?
Ugh.
Do what?
Did he ever actually meet him?
Don't think so, actually.
See, that's something I should have researched before the episode.
It would have made not really. I don't think so.
Uh-oh, someone's typing.
Parker's on it.
It's Parker. It's because his keyboard's so damn loud.
Cyrus says if they do a new movie, Lincoln should be played by Samuel L. Jackson. No, Cyrus.
No. It's not actually Snakes on a Plane, Cy. Shut up.
But no, they did not meet.
They did not meet. Okay.
No, of course they didn't.
Hey, are you a historian?
No, but I know that Graham Poe.
You guys are getting.
You don't know.
You don't know me.
You don't know my life.
Yeah. So it's at this point that we start to kind of get the real, the real meat of the story. He follows a vampire to a plantation and witnesses 9 vampires kill 9 slaves. And that's a very horrific scene because it's literally like they're they're scared to death, of course. They're brought in, they're fed really well. They're basically told to stand there, and these 9, very wealthy looking white men walk up behind them, and then just like within a second they all turn and just rip these poor slaves apart. And that's when he literally says in the book, he realizes as long as there are slaves, there will be vampires.
I didn't see that coming. I thought they were going to free them, and then the vampires were going to be wrapped up in some other weird scheme.
No.
I was like, oh, that's nice of them. But no.
Yeah.
Instead, horrific killings by these vampires.
Yeah. The next scene is he falsely corners a man in a saloon, and that was like he said his most embarrassing thing. He was like 99% sure this guy's a vampire, is planning on killing him, but it's just a dude. He like literally runs out of the window screaming like in the middle of the night in like his underwear, and he's like, "Well, I called that badly." But he leaves home at the age of 22, settles in Decatur, Illinois, running a general store, meets Jack Armstrong, who is the kind of the leader of a group of bullies. Basically, is what it boils down to. They're a bunch of toughs, and because
I'm picturing Sandlot. So keep going.
Bunch of ruffians.
Because Lincoln is so strong and tall, they immediately want to try to take him down a peg, but he ends up besting the biggest of them, Jack, and they end up becoming good friends like pretty quickly. They just literally bond, and it's at this point he starts he tells him that what it is he's doing, that he's hunting vampires, and Jack's like, look dude, you're full of shit, whatever. They get a letter. They go back to the same bar, and they're looking for he's like, I knew there was a vampire here. I guess I just called it wrong, and it turns out to be the bartender. So they wait for the bartender to head out. They follow him down the street, and don't realize it. He gets the upper hand on him. Almost kills Jack, causes him basically to crap his pants, and he narrowly kills him, and then it's at that point that they basically become hunting partners. Going back to your idea of this being a buddy cop situation.
Just saying.
So when you said buddy cop, I was like, no, actually, yeah, that would work.
Because you can have the smart know-it-all trying to train the hapless simpleton with the heart of gold. It's, I don't know. This book just read like a movie script.
I agree.
I was like, oh yeah, that's right. They did make a movie out of this,
No,
but it wasn't this though.
No, it was not.
I was like, you could have just taken it directly from the book, and it would have been a better.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You're very right. That's true.
Yeah.
it's really weird. Yeah.
At this point, Abe runs for the legislature, loses, opens a general store, it closes. He volunteers to fight Native Americans. Sorry, it says Indians, but anyway. Never sees battle at all. Opens another general store, and runs for office again, but this time he wins. He also falls in love with Anne Rutledge. Abe goes to leave for the legislature, returns, plans to marry her, writes a letter to the man who's she's betrothed to. So in the thing, she's already promised to someone else. So he writes a letter. He's like, listen, I'm in love with her. You basically left her alone. I would like her hand. Dude shows back up, and turns out he was a vampire. And
Everybody's a vampire.
exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's like, oh, this guy's a bad dude. Vampire.
Yep.
Boom. Roasted. Like,
Well, hey, it is a little one-dimensional, but I mean, it definitely kind of re-cements the whole idea that, hey, you know what? Vampires are bad shit, and they keep fucking up my life. So
yeah, I already knew that. Like,
And then it turns into a rom-com. Like,
Oh,
there's a
God.
love triangle,
with a vampire.
but they're with a twist.
it literally does.
Is when
She
they're, like, drinking a
dies,
shake,
unfortunately,
and it's a
very
shake, it's just
horribly.
blood. Like, oh no.
Let's see here. Abe almost commits suicide. Henry brings him the vampire that killed Anne, and he basically tortures. They basically together torture him in the most slow possible way.
Yeah, real like brutal stuff.
Yeah, like they have him staked. He's on fire. They keep putting
Yeah.
water on him so he will burn slow as possible.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So they didn't really like specify. Is there a best way to kill a vampire? Or
I would assume just beheading.
because said like beheading because like they can get shot a bunch of times, but then if you just like crack their skull open, then they can die too, or bleed out, or I don't know.
Asking for a friend or
Yes.
You're gonna give Sai some ideas as to what your job really
Yeah,
is.
don't add fuel to the fire.
Oh, so that's it. Parker's not really in the Secret Service. He's a
I got a
vampire.
great hatchet for it. It's already made. So
Well, so does Ray. I mean, the other night we were on the show, and
Yeah.
Ray's like, "Hold on, I'm gonna grab my
he's got
axe."
a great.
And it takes Ray less than 10 seconds to
Yeah.
get that thing too, so y'all better remember that.
Yeah. Well, he has one in every room.
It's right here.
See? Less than 10 seconds.
See? Yeah, there
every
you go.
Time. That's consistency.
Yay,
I
Canada.
respect that, Canada.
That's a perfect one for. Yeah. Like, can you throw it 30 yards?
Probably. He's Canadian.
Probably I couldn't. I could throw it, but it wouldn't do anything. He could.
I mean,
probably-
that's 90 feet. That's
That's not a bad
impressive.
distance, especially with some,
Canada.
if you're gonna have enough force to really do something with it. So
strike a
It probably I would.
vampire asunder. You gotta put some.
Jesus.
yeah.
His aim would be bad, but he could probably throw it.
That's not the point. Just
I
throw it.
believe.
Well, no, you kind of have to hit where you're aiming at, Laney. It doesn't
Well,
really
not in
work
Canada. It's
otherwise.
fine.
You can't just scare them. Like, you actually have to, like, hit them.
That would be my go-to. It's like, I'm just going to scare the crap out of him, and I'll never know that I don't have any real skills.
Right?
Oh Lord. It's at this point Abe almost commits suicide. So I already went over that. He basically kills the vampire. Starts to feel a little bit better. I mean, I feel a little bit better. Abe breaks out of his depression, but starts sending Jack on errands. He moves to Springfield, becomes a lawyer, and meets Speed. Speed's kind of his. Speed is fast talking. He just basically says he's annoying as hell, but he ends up becoming fond of him. They're friends. They're both very learned men. Whereas Jack is very down to earth. He's not book smart at all, but he has a kindred spirit with him, and that they're both strong and that they can crush vampires. Whereas Speed is more his intellectual equal. So
It seemed like he trusted Jack pretty quick to just start doing his bidding for him when he leaves.
Well, I think several months, if not a year, passes over this time. Like I said, I'm condensing. So
Right. Well, I know that, but I mean, even in the book, it just seems really quick. I don't know.
Like he needed to move the plot along.
Well, I mean, he does that throughout the whole book. It's just one line, giant sentence, basically. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems. I don't know. It just seems like he trusts him really quick. He's like, "Oh, I gotta leave. Go kill vampires." Person who doesn't know how to do that. Bye. And then he just like leaves. Like, "Oh, well, I guess Jack is dead. Then I guess." That's kind of what I thought. I was like, "Well, he dies." So, but I don't know.
Anyway,
Just ramblings of an
Wonder
insane
Woman.
person. Don't listen to me.
it's all good. So he gets over the loss. He begins hunting once again while he's on circuit, what I was referring to earlier. And there's a really interesting battle between him. Oh, that was the one where he was going to battle the woman. Literally, meets. He knocks on the door. He's ready to just basically, take his axe and plunge it into whoever opens the door. And it turns out to be the woman he was defending earlier in the day. But she turns out to be a vampire. They get into it. Barely. He's like, literally, he's like, well, I don't think I'll ever have the opportunity to, protect someone in court and then kill them later that night. So, it's at this point he meets Mary Todd, falls in love, but she's being courted by Stephen Douglas. And then, but the father approves the marriage. He didn't think it was going to happen. Henry sends a letter warning that Mary's father is actually a friend of vampires. So he breaks it off. Speed talks him, he ends up going to visit Speed. They talk about the, vampires. Speed's like, yes, I knew about vampires. I grew up in the South and, that was around. That was the thing.
All the cool kids were doing it.
Yeah. So, Speed, this is where he kind of gets Speed up to speed about the vampires. They end up inviting 6 vampires to the house. He ends up killing 5 of them very quickly. The one tries to run off. Speed chases it. Almost dies. Abe saves him. In a very cinematic way, like literally as he's about to kill Speed, all of a sudden, this axe just comes out of everywhere and just goes.
Yeah.
So,
I could see it in my head, the camera, like it was insane.
Yeah. He moves back to Springfield. Has to convince Mary to marry him because she's like, why would I marry you? You left, you ran off. But they end up getting together, of course, and have their first son, Robert. And at that point, he gives up. Right, he gives up hunting. He's like, I'm done. And writes Henry. He's like, look, I'm done. It's at this point, Speed and Jack actually go on one last mission for him, and they don't really care for each other because the one's basically an ox and the other one's a parakeet. There's your other buddy cop there, and that was an interesting. The only reason I'm going to go into that one is because this is the one where it talks about it's a college professor. He's doing an autopsy on a guy, and then he goes into a hidden room. And when they follow him, they find really stacks of human bodies that are still alive, that are barely alive, and then this vampire is draining their blood, and it's in all these glass tubes above them. And during the battle, of course, the glass tubes get broken, and glass and blood go everywhere. And once again, it's a big movie scene.
Yes,
big set piece.
Yeah.
And they barely get out alive. Jack loses his hand, Speed basically, his leg gets messed up. And it's at this point, Abe gets elected to the House of Representatives, moves to DC. Henry writes him, asking him to change his mind. He's like, nope, not doing it. And then he has Eddie, his second son. He's disappointed in DC. I know that for a fact. I do know that when he first got to Washington, he very much had the impression that this is supposed to be learned men who are doing the best thing possible for the people who elected him, and it's just like most of these people are idiots or they don't care anything about the people they're elected for.
Some things never change.
Imagine that. Yeah. So he's disappointed in DC, and he finds out that the Southern Congress people, Congress critters, are in league with the vampires. And this is where they kind of, something that they've talked about throughout the book, is put on a very fine point. And it's basically,
Yes.
vampires are in league with the South. Basically, they're able to kill slaves. No one cares about slaves, so that's fine. They have a very easy way to feed that no one really cares about. And, they supply money and power to the South as long as there are slaves for them to feed on. So, once again, he meets Poe. Basically, Poe tells him about the Blood Countess. And it's funny. I love this scene because Poe is very, very detailed in this, talking about how, first off, he explains that, there's this woman and she becomes lovers with another woman. And of course, Abe's like, how does that
A
work?
woman?
Yeah. What?
They're two women?
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
And he's like, just go with it. Just go with it. And he's talking about how these very horrific deaths, about how they've killed like 600 girls, and they're just and he's explaining this in very great detail. And he's just like, will you please stop? Please stop. This is too much. Please stop and just get to the point. And he's like, the point is that, they took up, because this was so horrific, Europe took up arms and started hunting down vampires. And when they realized, oh shit, guess what? We can actually kill vampires. They started hunting and causing the vampires to flee Europe. So they came here because it's, easy prey.
Yeah, I wondered, knowing that, why wouldn't they just spread the word that you can do that to kill all the vampires and just tell the slaves they can do that, right?
Because they were giving them money and power. It was a thing.
Oh.
It was like, hey, listen, I can do certain things for you. I have lots of money and power that I can, influence people and stuff with. You give me slaves, I give you money and power. And it's like, all right, well, I'm done. So
I guess that's true. Yeah.
He didn't run for another term. He left DC, went back to Illinois to be with his family, focused on being a lawyer. It's at this point he loses Eddie. And Henry offers to bring him back. And of course he turns him down. He's like, no, as much as I miss my little boy, I can't damn him forever to be, a vampire. This hit me. Like the first couple of times I read this, I wasn't a father yet. So I'm like, man, that would be a hard decision. Now that I'm a father, I can't imagine having such a position put upon me. So this the last time or two I've read this book, it hit me really hard. It just did. Like I just thought, I was like, if given that choice, what the hell would I do? So.
Hey, no, that was genuine. I'm not even.
Was it? It's hard.
I'm not even trying to be an asshole right now. That was
really hard to tell with you.
Yeah.
For once, I was being very sincere.
Yeah. Well, boy who cried wolf. So.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up having two more boys, Willie and Tad. Jack dies, unfortunately. Let's see, Douglas.
Everyone dies.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Like
because vampires.
Like
if you were around. Jeez, yeah. If you're around him, he just ended up dying.
I think I was just being alive back then. Like.
Yeah, it's just another day.
Things are just.
Well, we lost Jack yesterday. Ugh, jeez, another one.
He coughed once last Thursday. I knew it was coming.
It dropped them like flies.
Douglas champions the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allows slavery in new regions. Lincoln debates him and becomes notable for his character in politics. Henry asking him to go to New York. He goes, gets knocked out. He's taken to a secret meeting, and it's at this point that basically they tell him, "Look, we need you to be president so that you can basically help us stop slavery and stop the Southern vampires." So he runs against Douglas in the Senate, but loses. Stewart, who was supposed to be the lead nomination for the Republican Party, all of a sudden just goes, "Well, I'm going to Europe for a while," and that was
how convenient.
Yeah, basically a way to leave him as being the primary person for the Republican nomination. So, let's see here. Oh, and it's at this point. So he becomes the Republican nomination. And the Democrats are split between the North and the South. The Northern Democrats and the Southern Democrats are kind of fighting each other as who they want. They send 3 vampires to start protecting him. And it's at this point Henry sends a letter asking him to kill Jefferson Davis. I'm pretty sure Lincoln never actually tried to kill Jefferson Davis.
I sure hope not.
You would have heard about that one?
Although that would be really interesting if it happened.
Yeah.
He takes Speed and another friend of his, Layman, down to Davison's house. They get inside. It's basically a trap. Bunch of vampires show up. There's yet another big set piece for a movie scene. We got a big battle between not only vampires and humans, but so Lincoln wins the presidency. States begin to secede. Let's see. I'm just trying to run through here because I know we've gotten pretty long on the show.
And that's when he's introduced to the Union, which I like how they called the Union was.
I love that
like
idea.
Vampire thing. It's like, oh, that's cute. Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you did.
So everything breaks at Fort Sumter. And then it's at this point, Lincoln starts filling in people about the Southern vampire plot. South won the Battle of Bull Run with the vampires. That was another pretty graphic scene which was awesome.
Yeah.
And then his son Willie dies over the course of several days.
Yeah, the other one
Another
dies.
one.
Yeah.
Another one bites the dust.
Once again, hit kind of hard.
Sorry.
I'm just like, but I mean, think about it. How could
You're
you
singing
be
Queen
expected? In all reality, though, this dude was in the process of trying to keep our country from falling apart, and his kid dies.
Yeah, he suffered from melancholy, as they called it, but severe depression, like most of his adult life.
And yeah, I see why.
And
And
the presidency was a huge part of that.
And I
his
know,
wife also
I
had
know
a
this
lot
is a
of
work
mental
of fiction,
health issues,
but
so
it
was
definitely
all-
helps illustrate why so many people consider him to be such a great president, because he did such a great job despite all of this shit happening to him. So,
Right?
Is Willie the one that died from the vampire?
yes.
Okay. Or did they all? I don't remember.
From the
They all
poisoning,
died.
Yeah.
And then here is another legitimate scene. Lincoln rides to Fort Stevens to see the battle, and it basically becomes fatalistic and is like literally on the front lines, and is the only sitting president who's ever been in, like, who's seen a battle as an acting president. And then he kind of slowly but surely pulls himself out of it. And then, of course, it talks about they kind of embellish on the meeting with General McClellan after the Battle of Antietam. And, there's that very historic picture of them sitting there not liking each other because, McClellan basically screwed up. They
just let him go.
They just let him go. And, there's that very famous line of, if you're not using the army, I would very much like to borrow them.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, wow, that's really awesome.
From your
it's kind
boss.
of a douchey way to put it, but go Lincoln.
Right.
And then he gives, running through the rest of it, because it does run pretty quick. Gives the
but
idea
at this point, there's 20 pages left till the end of the book?
Yeah, it runs pretty quick.
Yeah, all of a sudden he decided to pick up the pace.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I'm tired of writing. And then he just, started writing faster.
His
I
last
got through all
30
my
years of
action
his life.
scenes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a whole week would go by, and it's like, okay, next scene.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
So we have the Emancipation Proclamation as a way to, which was legit as to, help disrupt the Southern war machine. Lee surrenders. We win the Civil War. Yay.
Yeah.
We lost.
And then we get the whole thing about how Booth is a vampire.
Okay, so my theory is that he saw, because you were talking about earlier, that he just wanted to marry the vampires and Lincoln stuff together. But I think they were sitting around drinking one night, and someone kind of said, someone brought up the whole Booth thing killing him. He's like, what if he was a vampire? And then they just built this whole book around the fact that he was a vampire and he killed him because of that. Because the book starts screaming, and then it hits this point and starts talking about Booth, and then it goes into detail for once, and then it catches back up and ends the book. So I think the whole point of the book was to write about Booth being a vampire.
Do you think maybe that was one of the first things that he wrote? And then like the rest of it kind of filled in as he went?
He did it like J.K. Rowling did with Harry Potter, where she's like, I already have the ending in mind, and then just kind of...
Yeah, I don't know. It just seemed that that chapter was for one person, talking about one person being a vampire, and another chapter, 4 years would go by and like 4 different scenes would happen. And then you slow down for this one area and you speed back up. It just was a weird pacing thing.
Because we got a lot of background on Booth.
Yeah, like I said, he spent a while talking about it, and I was like, this is so out of place that made me think that maybe that's the seed of the idea, and then they just kind of fleshed out everything after that, I guess. They needed a reason for him to be there at that time, I think.
Yeah.
Is what it seemed like to me anyway.
And then we end up with, goes through the whole scene. Booth is killed by Henry. And then the very last scene is somewhat, it wasn't painted extremely clearly, but it was clear enough that it was supposed to be that in 1963, we catch up with Henry and Abe watching Martin Luther King give his speech.
This was
okay.
That was the part I could have left off with.
That was so just dumb.
Yeah, that was just a little too much. So
that felt too like
forced.
End of the football movie. Going back to the
that's after the credits. That's the after the credits.
Yeah,
scene.
That's the.
As you're leaving the theater, you go, oh, yeah.
Now, see, that would have worked as an after credit thing. I think that would have been fine as an after credit thing, but for a book, it didn't really work out. So
yeah, that should have been in
for a book that was being written to become a movie.
Yeah. I don't know. That just.
Abe agreed to stay a vampire. He hated them his whole life.
Thank you.
He's just suddenly okay with, I'll just become a vampire.
Make sense. I appreciate that.
I mean,
didn't feel very on brand for Abraham.
He told the guy to go away and never see him or talk to him again after he offered for the 20th time someone else died to bring him back to life.
Yeah, then he's like, psych, let's hang out and be buddies.
Yeah, he's like, we're BFFs now, and
well, I'm alive again. I may as well.
Well, he had to work in that line one more time about how some people are just too interesting to kill.
And then that's on a black screen, and then the movie ends. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Well, speaking of the movie, we've mentioned it multiple times throughout the show.
We made a better movie.
Let's go ahead and just mention
who played who in that movie? I didn't actually look this up.
Nobody.
I thought about watching it after, and then I finished the book and decided that I was fine.
Okay, I'm going to start with Chris and I, because Chris and I probably have the strongest feelings about this. Both of us, I remember, read the book and greatly enjoyed the book.
Yeah.
And then we start seeing the trailers for this movie, and I'm like, that looks kind of interesting. The thing that stuck out the most was there was that slow motion scene of him swinging the axe and that tree explodes.
Floating.
And I'm just like, oh wow, they're going to take this and like really like kind of amp it up. This looks interesting. And
yeah, it looked cool.
Okay, so I was down for it. And then we went and watched the movie. And what were your thoughts, Chris?
I read the book so long ago. I think if I read the book now, I would probably look at it and read it a little bit differently, because when I first read it, I still, like you, Eugene, I'm late to the game with reading. And so I loved the book and I was really excited. I love vampire lore and different authors, different takes on it. I liked it. And then I was like, okay, the movie's coming out, gotta see it. And then I watched it and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Yeah.
So
because it's like and I understand, I think Seth actually did write the screenplay.
He did. He at least did the first draft.
Yeah. So my feeling of it now, looking back at it and having written a few things, is that he wrote the book, and after it was published, he probably had so many other ideas of where it could have gone and what he would have wanted to do, and then stuck that in the movie. Of all the different things he thought the story could go, and all the things he wanted to add and couldn't, or whatever. And because it was nothing like the book. Nothing. The plot was all backwards and things were jumping around, and it was just, it was stupid.
Yeah. So some of the things, okay, I understand, and we had this discussion a little bit when we were talking about The Martian. And I have thought since then, because I mean, if you've read The Walking Dead and then watched the show, they've done interviews with Robert Kirkman, who writes and is a showrunner, and he said he looked at the show as an opportunity to investigate and tweak some things that he originally had thought about doing with the book, but never did. He went down a different path, and I kind of got the same sense with you, but I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense though. Like, you spent all of that time researching Lincoln's actual life and tried to marry up these situations and these instances to be as real time as possible, and then you just totally threw all of that out for the movie.
Yes. Yeah, everything that seemed so important in the book was not even, it didn't matter.
They turned Henry into the villain.
Yes.
And I'm just like, no, I mean, granted, it's not, he, hated vampires, but Henry was like a friend. Like, yeah. So, yeah, it drove me insane.
In the end?
I'm sorry?
Movie? Or does he turn Abe in the end of the movie? Or
I don't remember. I don't think so.
Nobody else wants to know.
Honestly, I don't remember. I was like literally about halfway through that movie, I was like, and then 3/4 of the movie, I'm just like, oh, I've sat this long. I'm just going to, like, I almost got it and walked out.
I hope that end scene was like the one that they were like, no, I feel like that's too much. Like, we don't need
It was,
I remember watching the movie, but I did watch the movie, but I couldn't tell you what happened in it. It was really boring, and it just wiped from my memory.
Yeah, it's not. This is honestly, between this and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, yet another Seth Grahame-Smith book. I haven't completely reversed course on my theory of watch the movie first and then read the book, because I still look at it as the movie is the condensed version and the book is the expanded universe. Like, that's where you're going to get more depth on everything. But these two movies in particular are so bad that I don't want to tell anyone to watch them, because if I tell someone, oh, you should watch the movie first before you read the book, they're going to watch the movie and go, I'm not reading that book. That movie was, why would I want more of that?
And I only got halfway through Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I started reading that after I'd read Abraham Lincoln, and I had to stop. I only read half of it. I'm like, I couldn't.
Oh, is it that bad?
After reading.
Well, for me, I have a really, I think it's because he tried to keep it in the language of Jane Austen, and it was the way women perceived back then.
Stay in your lane, Seth.
So there are these prim and proper women that are supposed to be set in that time, except they fight zombies. Made no sense, and it was really boring. So even with zombies, it was boring.
I think, given what I've heard, this would be a better drunk history episode than a movie.
Yes.
Yes.
Whole book.
Thank you.
Holy shit! Yes.
I could see it like playing out as a drunk history.
Absolutely.
Oh, that would be great. That's a good call, Jen. Man.
I want to do that.
Yeah, no joke.
That would be our drunk history.
You guys should do it and record it. I'd love to hear
historical fiction.
Yes.
Well, I wonder who's going to play Abe.
The one with the beard.
Just have to get Mr. Parker to come up sometime.
I got you.
But yeah, so this is one of the movies that definitely I was like, nope, don't bother with the movie. Just and what's funny is when I was describing this earlier on Facebook, I think when I posted about it earlier this week, I have some friends of mine that worked at a campus I worked at, and they watched the movie and they liked it. And I was like, did you ever read the book? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, obviously that's why.
Not counting for good taste.
I'm like, read the book, and then you'll just be like, what the fuck did I watch? So, yeah. So, all right, well, that's pretty much our discussion of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
I have one thing to add.
Oh, yeah. Look ahead. Sorry, I forgot to wrap up with any post impression. So, yeah, Parker.
Did anybody else have a problem with the 5 dreams that were just dreams and not real? because after the first time he was dreaming, and then I woke up and everyone wasn't dead. It's like, okay, whatever. And
That got
then
kind of annoying, yeah.
and then it happened 3 or 4 more times, and I was like, can you just tell the story and not do the flashback dream bullshit and just get to it? Like, I don't know. The first time was okay, but then, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'm not a big fan of that style trope, whatever you want to call it, in books. It's not.
Yeah, not one of my favorites either.
Yeah, I just something else to bitch about.
So overall, I mean, I already said, even though this book does have a lot of faults, I still like it. I still love it. It's a fun read to me. So,
yeah, I won't read it again, but I wasn't upset that I read it.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Alrighty then.
Entertaining.
Any other thoughts anyone wants to throw out there real quick?
I wish I would have known how violent this book was going to be before I read it.
Oh, okay.
That would have been just FYI, guys. Well, heads up. As somebody who has to cover her eyes during Game of Thrones, it would have been.
Yeah, but you're just reading it though.
Yeah, but I still picture it, and I can still feel like it's happening to me, and I don't like that.
Fair enough.
Oh, so you're feeling the gore stuff, but when I bring up the stuff about, man, I can't imagine losing my kid, you're like, well.
I have a Queen lyric to go.
You have another one bites the dust.
Because
She's just like,
I am
whatever.
a heartless,
Obviously.
heartless she-beast.
So, well, speaking of books, our next book for next month is going to be "You're Never Weird on the Internet" by Felicia Day.
Yes.
So we're going back to the autobiographical.
Would it be an autobiography or more of a memoir?
Yeah, I guess it is more of a memoir because yeah.
I love a good memoir.
So yes, that will be the book that we're reading next time. So I've already read that one again, so I have to read that one again. So.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
Just real quick. This was the first time that I saw the word mezzanine written down before.
No, it's not.
I don't think I've ever seen that
on
word.
a ticket to the symphony or the ballet or something.
Oh yeah, that's right. Those multiple times I've been to the ballet. You're right.
Yes.
I was gonna say
I assumed that you had been to the symphony before.
I have, but I don't remember looking at the ticket. Anyway, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's that word spelled. I don't know. It was really weird.
That's a word.
Well, every once in a while, I just come across a book and I read. I'm like, I've never seen that word spelled before.
Spell it now.
I wrote it down.
The word is mezzanine.
MEZZANINES.
That would have been fine if you had stated the word at the beginning and at the end, but unfortunately.
But we're not at spelling bee, so it doesn't matter.
All right, children. Let's move on to our. What else have you been reading? Has anyone been reading anything else of interest lately?
I have.
What have you been reading, Lainey?
So, when Eugene and I had an event that he spoke about earlier over the weekend, and we met some pretty cool dudes at the table next to us.
Yeah.
That were actually, I was going to say peddling, but that makes it sound really mean. I don't mean it in a mean way.
Peddling their wares?
Yeah, they were peddling their wares. No, they were selling, actually, they're promoting and selling their comic book series, which is called Speak No Evil. And it looked really cool and sounded really cool, so I actually picked up a copy of the first and the second issue. So I have finished the first issue, and I'm starting the second one. And it's really good. I've actually really, really enjoyed it. It's kind of cool. It's different than other comic books that I've read because it's set in the 30s, and basically it's these two kids who come across the abandoned cabin of Tesla and H.P. Lovecraft or whatever, and it's just really, really interesting. It's got some cool sci-fi, some cool horror elements. I've really enjoyed it. The illustrations are really great. I'm actually pretty stoked about it. So go check that out. In fact, they're doing a Kickstarter right now, I think, for their third issue.
What's it called? So I can write it down?
Speak No Evil. You already have a copy, so.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do. It's in my backpack.
You just don't have it yet.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Hey, thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, speaking of comics, I'll go ahead and jump in here. I've actually started reading two different things. The first thing that I read and cleared was Ghostbusters 101 has dropped.
Nerd.
Yes,
Jeez.
it is. It is basically a crossover series with the Ghostbusters Answer the Call, aka the 2016 series, with the original series. I mean, it's just the first issue. It's very simple, but I like where it's going. That being said, the other thing that I started reading came out, I think, just this week. Maybe last week. It's the third book in the Jessica Blackwood series. It's called Blackfall. It's written by Andrew Mayne. I listened to several podcasts that he's on. He's a he's not only a stage magician, but he also has created quite a few. He's written multiple magic books. He's done lots of different tricks and sold them to big name magicians.
They're illusions, okay, not tricks.
Sorry.
A trick is a little more, that's more money.
But he refers to them as tricks as well. So,
He's wrong too. So,
yeah.
But the series is basically about an FBI agent. She grew up. Her dad and her grandfather were both famous magicians, and she was kind of getting away from that. And then a bunch of really crazy shit starts happening. And when she is, kind of stumbles onto the case, she starts realizing that, someone's using some really high level, illusionist shit to pull off these murders and cause and do a lot of damage. So of course they're like, well, we know nothing about this, so we're going to pull you in on the case. This is the third book in the series. It's very high level. There's a lot of explaining to it, a lot of information. But anyone who has any interest in magic, is this is the only time magic's ever been, because he is a magician. So there's this is the only time, magic is being accurately portrayed in a book. So most of the time, this kind of throwing some other stuff. So really good. Who knows? I'm even proposed the first one eventually. So because I like the character, she's very well rounded. So, Chris, are you reading anything of interest?
Yes, I'm reading a sci-fi romance.
Called.
I call it my smut because it's
Nerd.
Yeah, it's a little nerd. Are you kidding me? I love it. And it's by Sherilyn Keenan. Probably not
whatever
it.
it is.
Anyways, I love her stuff. I think it's the sixth one of her Legend series, and it's set about 6,000 years in the future in this Akkadian universe, and it's got battles and sci-fi stuff and mechas and all that kind of stuff, and then it's love and romance and brooding and happily ever after, and it's just
the brooding.
all kind of the brooding. Sometimes it gets boring and I have to flip through the brooding, but
okay.
Fast forward the brooding.
Well, 5 pages of brooding, you're like, I get it, you're tortured. But that aside, it's I love it. It's a guilty pleasure because it's just, I love that they end up together and it's all happy, and I love reading stuff like that.
As long as you're enjoying it, that's all that matters.
Oh yeah, and it's 800 and something pages.
Ooh, there you go.
Yeah. And
get real deep in that smut.
Real deep, real brooding. Lots of feelings happening, but it's good.
There you go. Boldy, are you reading anything of interest?
I'm reading.
I should ask, since I'm talking to you, I should say, how many things are you reading of interest? 5 or 6?
Yeah, right.
I don't know if it's interested in any of you all, but I just finished reading a book called The Sun is Also a Star by Nicole Yoon, which is a coming-of-age novel about how you can, she proposes in this story between two young people. The guy says that he can make a girl fall in love with him within a day based on this article that if you ask some stranger these 30 questions, then scientifically that yes, that person will fall in love with you because you'll make them vulnerable based on these questions and their answers and that sort of thing. It's a beautifully written book. You get the perspective of both the male and the female. And I won't tell you how it ends up, but it's you get both sides. You get the scientific side of it, and you get the actual emotive and ethereal side. So I've read that, and then I've also been reading a children's novel because I do kind of tend to read the kids' books so that I can recommend the kids.
That's part of your job.
I appreciate that, Baldy.
Yeah, so I'm reading this one now. That's kind of like our never-ending story, to be honest with you. So it's quite interesting, the characters that are in it and the magic that seems to prevail. So it's called The Girl Who Drank the Moon. So that's what I'm reading.
That's an awesome name.
That sounds amazing.
Yes, it is. Well, it's on the Blue Bonnet list too, which is for the Canadian, our our award-winning books in the state of Texas. So,
Do they still have that? That's awesome.
I remember looking for those books in the library when I was
Me too. They have
the little stamp on them.
Yeah, the little on it down there. Yep. We have stickers now to the stamp.
Yeah. Oh.
But yep, you got it.
Cheap out.
right. Thanks, Trump.
Oh. Jennifer, what are you reading?
I just finished listening to a book called Originals: How Nonconformists Can Change the World, or something like that, by Adam Grant.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, if you're even thinking about doing something requiring courage or any kind of bold action, or not, if you're just like trying to get out of a rut or you just want to be inspired, like, it was so good. I can't explain how inspiring it was.
It was called Originals?
Yeah. It's by Adam Grant. I might have gotten the title wrong, but it's just like he's a professor at a college talking about how all these people throughout history have made these amazing changes, but how they weren't even that confident going in, and we look back on them now and they were visionaries, like Martin Luther King and people we may not have even heard of, like the women suffragists, but how they were just trying to do these great things, but at the time they almost didn't do them, or something almost stopped them, and they persevered, and kind of their mindset and what you can do if you have something you want to pursue. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, check that one out. Parker, you reading anything of interest?
My structured geology book. No. I mean, I think it's really cool, but yeah.
Well, there you go. I can't add anything to that. So,
yeah, that's just the way it is.
As always, if you would please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Music, wherever you listen to the show. If you're watching the show, especially if you're watching live right now, thank you very much for that. We are going to start doing most of our shows, or try to do a lot of our shows live on YouTube. So if you haven't already, please give us a like and a follow. That would definitely help out.
That'd be cool.
Hell yeah.
Also, check out our other shows. As we mentioned earlier, we have the Epic Rhythm and Brews that should be coming out here pretty quick. We record our next episode of the Epically Geeky Show on Saturday night. And if you have any book suggestions that you would like to see us read, definitely send them our way. We always vote as to what the next couple of books are going to be. So actually, I need to start cobbling together the next vote, figure out what we're reading after Felicia Day's book. I have a feeling I kind of know what that's going to be. If you would, if you've got any suggestions, forward them to us. We'd love to hear them. So, where can we find you on the internet, Lainey?
You can find me on Twitter and on Instagram at It's a Lainey Bird, and you can also find me over on the Epic Rhythm and Brews podcast, as well as the Epically Geeky Show, and at epicallygeeky.com.
There you go, Chris. Where can we find you online?
On Instagram at the.lake.life, and I almost have my Etsy shop up.
I saw that.
Next week.
I love watching Chris do that name.
Oh God, it's brutal. Anyways, but it's taking longer than I thought. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't foresee with the S shop. I'm also on the Epically Geeky podcast, and here and epicallygeeky.com.
Baldy, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Library Voodoo, and that's about it.
Good deal. Jennifer, where can we find you online?
Twitter and Instagram at Het's Gonna Be Me.
Parker, we can't find you online.
Epically Geeky, the website.
There you go. There you go.
I'm
Epicallygeeky.com.
there. Yeah.
And as always, you can find my individual wacky adventure online at Optimus Gene on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. For everyone on the site, have a good night.